Hello, everyone. Welcome to Genealogy Adventures. My name is Brian Sheffy.
And I'm Danya Williams. Today is a gloomy day. Woo.
We hope that you are enjoying your day. Thank you for spending your time with us. And from both of us, a very, very happy, our best wishes for a very happy and successful, prosperous new year.
Yes.
We are out of 2020. Yes.
Oh my God, thank you.
Can we please? Donnie, is there anyone that you want to give a shout out to from the audience?
I just want to say hello to everyone and hello Karen and Stephanie and just welcome.
Okay, so we're always excited. Every show we're excited. You guys are probably tired of us saying it, but we're really excited this week because we are joined by Yoruba Richin, who is a professor, writer, director, and a former producer with Democracy Now! She has done an amazing documentary about the Green Book, which, as a documentary, it offers just a real, unvarnished look at the history of the travel guide that helps so many African Americans safely navigate John Crow era, Jim Crow era America, if I can get my terminology correct. The documentary covers the violence, insults, and dangers Black Americans faced on the road, and it really conveys a remarkable sense of the pride and sense of community that our people felt um, in terms of creating safe spaces for themselves and for others. And again, the wonderful achievement that they did is they created these safe spaces and published them in the Green Book all around the country. And that's something that we're going to spend a lot of time about because people think Jim Crow, they just think the South. It was all over America. So hopefully going to raise some awareness on that one today. And really kind of talking about the establishments of Black restaurants, hotels, automotive repair places, stores, all that kind of thing, vacation retreats, all of these kind of safe Black spaces that are all around the country, that were all around the country. So without further ado, Yoruba, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Happy New Year to you both.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Donnie, I'll let you go first this week.
Okay, so yes, let me tell you first and foremost, I was very excited about the entire show. I loved it. I loved everything about it. Your commentary, how you were the narrator, the things that you said, what really got me because I have my side with me and the group knows it. So when you came off and said the flyness of us, I started snapping my fingers. I was like, yes, the flyness.
That was one of my contributors. That wasn't me, but it's one of my favorite lines.
As soon as she said that, I was like, yes, because they stood there and they were taking their picture and everything. And I was like, yes, sisters, I see y'all. So, I'm like, the flyness, I love it. But the love that we have and everything, everything that they were saying was very true. But one of my main questions was, what made you want to do this particular story?
So basically how this film came about was I was approached by a production company in the UK, actually. And this was this was probably in like 2017. And it was at a time when the Green Book, which a lot of us had never heard of, some of us have, and some of us had books, but a lot of us didn't. And the Green Book was getting some press because the Schomburg Library in New York City, the preeminent African-American research library, had been putting the Green Books online and making it available for people to see. And that had spurred some articles and some writing about the Green Book and what it was. And the production company that initially contacted me, they were interested initially in looking at African Americans' experiences on Route 66 and that iconic highway, that we all know through song and, mythology, that was actually, a lot of it was not not available to African Americans because there were many places that we were not. There are few places that we could stay. Let's put it that way. Then it expanded this idea that they had to do it about the Green Book, and what was the Green Book? What was its significance? And they were looking for a director. So and I was one of the names that they had come across, and they contacted me. And when we started talking, as I said, I didn't know what the Green Book was. And I consider myself pretty good on African-American history. It's, part of the stories that I tell. And the fact that I did not know about this book made me immediately interested in telling the story. And so the fact that I did not know, and I wanted to find out more, this was a book that was published from 1936 through 1967, and was in the hands of so many Black people, but yet was something that, a lot of us didn't know about. But also the fact when I started, just started digging in, realizing that the Green Book wasn't just about a book. It wasn't just about a travel guide. It was about how we as a people created community through these businesses that were listed in the book, and also sought pleasure and leisure. So it wasn't just about escaping, it wasn't just about a terroristic society. Of course, that's the reason why it was created, because we were living in a terroristic society all across the country. But we also were in pursuit of leisure and pleasure very, very early on. And driving afforded that. And the places that were the vacation spots that were listed in the book afforded that as well. So that was also my intrigue too, that it wasn't just a story of escape or fear. It was a story of how we created, the Green Book is a story of how we created our own communities, and built these communities at a time when we were living in, terrorism, of a stark terrorism in this country.
Because the thing that really resonated with me, and it really made me think about it, was that as Americans, we kind of have grown up with the mythology of the American relationship with the automobile, that the automobile represented freedom and travel. And then when you start delving into the Green Book and really what that represents, you realize, well, even though obviously African Americans were buying cars, Black people were buying cars, we didn't have the same freedom to drive wherever we wanted, to park wherever we wanted, as anyone else would have been able to do. And I really had to spend some time kind of percolating on that one, and just letting that thought kind of flow through.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like there's a lot that people always ask me, like, well, why is the Green Book? Like, why people don't know, many people don't know about it when it was such a, prevalent thing. And I think that it's something, where oppressed communities, not just African Americans, but a lot of oppressed communities, we don't like to talk about things that are painful. We don't like to talk about our family members may not want to talk about the time that they had to, they were forced to go to the bathroom in the road because they couldn't use the restroom. So I think that though it's like that kind of, it's like thing where it's like a dichotomy where it was very commonplace, but also something that was maybe not talked about, and that we lost some of that, that oral history about what we had to endure when we, did something as simple as get on the road.
And there were parts in the documentary that really made me smile, because I kind of like to go back to some of the positives that you were talking about. And there were two scenes. One was with a woman of a certain age, and she's remembering something that was decades previous, talking about how people dressed. And she was like, the women turned out looking like looking perfection, that the men were really handsome. And you had interspersed some clips of people actually dancing and how they were dressed. And it was the resilience, and it was just seeing their joy in the moment, being amongst their own people, in a really in a really lovely kind of lovely atmosphere. I think that was Idlewild.
It was Idlewild. Yep.
Yeah, that was Idlewild.
That was Idlewild. And, you know, we had to really obviously pick and choose the places that we were going to focus on and what we were going to, you know, the stories that we were going to tell. And, you know, in 55 minutes, it's obviously a limited, you know, version of what we can tell. But Idlewild was an amazing spot. And there were many Idlewilds. There were many places like that. And, you know, that's where also many of our performers were performing during that time, during the 40s and 50s at these Black resorts, you know. So those places that have a lot of it has been lost. That, again, that history that's been lost. I remember when I went to Idlewild and I saw, you know, some of the markers that they had. And Idlewild was started, it was these white men started selling parcels of land to Black well-to-do in like the 1910s. And some of the first, these very prominent Black people, like the first, I believe he was the first heart surgeon Black heart surgeon who practiced at the University of Chicago in like 1915. Was like buying parcels. You know, these other very prominent real estate people from Detroit and Chicago. It's a fascinating history. Really, really fascinating. And they began selling it to their friends and so on and so on and so on. So it's that history to me that gives me chills to think about. So much history that we don't know, that even though we were, again, as I emphasized, living from fear of white terrorism in sundown towns, like we talked about, we were also heart surgeons and, you know, buying land and creating towns and communities. And that's the history that I think is so beautiful and so important for us to tell, as well as the other stuff.
And I guess talking about lost history, because really what you're talking about, especially with that last group of people, is that there were segments of the Black American population that had disposable income. And again, that's not something that we've been programmed to think about in terms of Black finances and Black economics.
Absolutely. And that's been from, you know, the time that we were, you know, brought here. You know, we've always had upper class, upper middle class segment of our society that has, you know, created these very vibrant communities. You know, whether it be business, you know, business hubs or places of leisure.
And speaking of the sundown towns, let me tell you what made my mouth just kind of go to the ground. When it was said that at 6 p.m. they would ring a bell to let the Black people know that they had so much time to get out of the town. Now I had heard about the fact that, you know, they were telling you don't let the sun come catch you in this town. I had heard about all that. And but what I did not know that that a bell rung and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like they actually did these things. I mean, I know, like, I want to go in depth as far as the book is concerned, but right now we're talking about all of the different things that we learned in this documentary, and what our families had to go through, and to learn that they were ringing this bell for the workers, the laborers, the domestic people. If you weren't out of that town by that time period, by a certain time period, you were probably going to get lynched, killed, hung. Something was going to happen to you. That was amazing to me. Like I was blown.
It was basically an age-old message. We want your labor, but we don't want your bodies.
That's right. Yeah. And it's, you know, that the book there's a book called Sundown Towns. I think it's called Sundown Towns, and it really details the sundown towns that were all over the country and those kinds of practices that happened with the bell ringing or other ways, you know, signage that said that Black people need to leave by a certain time. Yeah, I mean, this is the stuff that they don't want to talk about in this country. That's why we're kind of blown away when we discover it. It's because that history has been buried And, you know, I think that's part of how we end up with such different sort of experiences and understanding of this country. Because Black people and white people, you know, largely, you know, I'm not saying all and everyone, but, you know, have different understandings of, you know, of history. And quite frankly, you know, going into today, you know, there needs to be a real re-education of white folks of understanding what the history, like really like a re-education. And until that happens, I don't think, you know, I think we're going to see the kind of like craziness that, you know, that we see today.
And I just want to say, especially for people who are going to be watching this on demand, is because we're going to get pushback on this episode. People are going to be, why are you dragging this up? This is ancient history. And I just want to say, for the record, I was born in 1966, and I'm old enough to remember, even though I was really young at the time, my father had the Green Book, and we would travel south using the Green Book. I remember reading it in the back of the car, you know, parents trying to keep their kids entertained. Here, read this. Just be quiet for 15 minutes. So I remember holding them in my hand, reading them, not understanding why my dad had it, but obviously now as an adult, I do. So that's within my lifetime. So that's not way, way, way back when. I mean, yeah, okay, it's 50 something years ago, but still, it's within my living memory. It's within my living aunts and uncles' living memories.
And that's what we also showed in the film. And the people who we interviewed were, you know, all alive. Right. And they had, you know, memories of, like you, of being a kid with their, you know, family traveling and looking at the Green Book.
And let me say this, you know, I'm 48 and soon to be 49. But the thing is that I can remember my mother, we traveling back and forth to Virginia Beach or whatever, and we packed food. You know, we had a little cooler in the car and we packed the food. Then no, we didn't have a Green Book or anything like that, but she packed the food. I can remember, I remember that, the packing of the food, you know, and all of that being done. And we might not have had to stop on the side because of how the distance, but it was already there. She didn't have to pull over, and we didn't have to stop to get it or anything like that. Maybe that was something that she remembered doing, because my mother is older than me. So because my mom's older than me, that's, you know, that may be something that a lot older than me. Let me rephrase that. Everybody's mother's older than them, but she's a lot older than me. So those things, it's those types of things that, you know, that I even remember for myself. Then I would have my little Dole fruit bars and the ice, you know, a lot of ice, because I love Dole fruit bars, and she'd have them there, and her Pepsis and some chicken and that's what you were saying in the thing. And I'm like, I remember that.
Yeah. And because there were so many places that we could not stop. So you had to make sure your children were fed and that you were, you know, had the food and that it was easily packed. Fried chicken is something, you know, fried chicken, besides it being delicious, it's something that you can pack easily, you know. Pie, something that you can wrap easily. So yeah, those are all traditions that came out of, you know, the fact of us traveling. And I guess the other thing too that I learned, which I thought is so fascinating, of course, is that, you know, the dawn of the automobile and the automobile age happened in tandem with the Great Migration.
Yes.
Right. That was, and there were many different ways that Black people traveled from the South to the North, driving, trains, buses, but we were always going back and forth in some way. And so, you know, there's a book called The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson.
I have that.
It's an amazing book, which really is the first book that details, you know, the greatest migration that this world has ever, you know, that this country at least has ever seen in a short amount of time. And so that also was, you know, about the dawn. That was also in tandem with the dawn of the, you know, the automobile. So that was a big part of how we, you know, of how we moved and how we tried to, you know, to find better lives and better, you know, situations for ourselves outside of the South.
And one of the things Brian and I talked about with the dawn of the automobile was one of the things that I realized is how the changing of how we would, the labor. So we would go from the field, and now we were the labor in the automobile industry because it made a difference. That was how we were doing. You know, we went from the field to the trains. We were the conductors. We were the waiters on the trains, and then the automobiles came, and now we were those people, and so on and so forth. And then after that happened, and we get into the early 80s, we're now the construction workers and and things like that. And I remember that, and it's like the transition of us is amazing, but in the same instance, what did it do to us? And I guess I'm trying to transition into the actual Green Book now, and how the businesses lost everything once the Civil Rights Act came through.
Yeah,
I found it really fascinating.
Yeah, that's one of the most interesting things.
Yeah.
Right, about it. But I just wanted to say quickly, when you talked about from the fields to the factory, that is why I thought it was so important that we include the Detroit story, right? Because Detroit was really a center where they were, you know, as I talk about in the film, where they were where literally Henry Ford was working with Black ministers in Detroit to get Black people from the South to come and work in the factory and to work in those factories, and which helped spur the dawn of the height of the automobile age, right? So it's all connected, even though there were places, many places that we could not go, and we needed to create our own guidebook for that. So it's just really, really interconnected in a way that I find fascinating.
It is.
I think in terms of the book, what I really loved is the diversity of businesses. And it's something that Johnny and I were talking about this morning on the phone, talking about looking at who's owning what kinds of businesses, and that women owns not just bed and breakfasts, not just boarding houses, but hotels. And not even little hotels. I can't remember her name, and I can't remember the ad. But some
Alberta
of the hotels,
Snacks, baby.
That was it.
Alberta.
Yeah.
Alberta.
Yeah, and that part came, I did not know that at all, that was going to, at all be part of the film, a distinct part of the film when I started. But at one point when we were just sort of looking through the Green Book and, trying to understand, and we started seeing all these women-owned businesses, we were like, whoa, this is like a whole thing. I found Alberta, though, through a family friend who had met her niece, who we interviewed. And when I told her I was working on this, she was like, oh my gosh, I just met somebody whose aunt, had a hotel that was in the Green Book in Missouri. So that was some of these connections that I made in the film were just through like family and friend connections, right? Because it's so, as we said, it's ubiquitous, even though, a lot of us don't know the story. But yeah, and then, what you just said, Danya, about the fact that with the passage of the civil rights, and, this is, I'm sure you guys have this conversation amongst your friends, like what has integration done for us, right? What has been the sort of part of integration that has, that has destroyed our businesses, that has destroyed, communities and full on Black businesses, vacation spots, all of that. That all happened with integration. And, it was an unforeseen consequence.
But why? I mean, well, and that my whole issue with that, I feel that should not happen. I feel like, why are we as African, and you guys, I need y'all to, I'm gonna scroll up, I'm gonna go past, because we got a lot of people who's, talking about how they remember pulling over, eating, we got a lot of people who's talking about that. So I'm gonna scroll past all of that right now, y'all, and I want y'all to really chime in on what I'm getting ready to say. Why is it that we cannot support everything, everyone, everybody?
Or
Why
support,
do we,
support choice.
why can't we support choice? And you know, because this particular documentary, if you have not seen it, you're going to see the rise and fall of Black people. This is literally what this documentary shows. It shows the rise and fall. And the reason why I say that is because you have Black people who are owning hotels. They're owning everything. They're owning everything from hotels to restaurants to snack bars, stores, food stores, grocery stores, gas stations, everything. They're owning everything. Entertainment spots, everything, anything you can think of, they were owning it. They had it. And then as soon as the Civil Rights Act passed, we left them. And we started going, we were like, oh, okay, we don't need you no more. And now we're going to go straight to this. And that was that.
Yeah.
Why? Why did we do that?
Well, I'll just chime in my own, that there's, I'm sure there's many sort of academic books written about this, and which there needs to be. But I think one of the things, that we, and this is, this may sound controversial, but we had been taught through the oppression of slavery and Jim Crow that to be in a white establishment around white people is what our goal was, as opposed to economic power, right? When we have tried to have, and then combined with the fact, when we did have economic power, literally it was, we were burned down, like in Tulsa and so many other communities, when we did create economic power. So it became ingrained in us in some ways that, the way to make it was to be able to go to the white establishments, not have our own, because we couldn't have that. Now, what I do think that's happening, that's positive, I think we are seeing today much more effort and energy to supporting Black business and finding out, trying to find out where we can put our dollars as Black people into Black business. So I think that we're coming, on the other side of that. But that's my thought.
Okay, because so Clarissa Walker says, how would you know who owned what? Emily Davis says, we have ourselves to blame, the thought that theirs was better. And that's kind of like what you just said.
Well, can I answer that question before we start?
Yeah.
So how do you know who owned what? The face standing behind the cash register.
Yeah.
If it's a Black face and a brown face, then it's a Black and brown business. If it's not a Black or a brown face, it's whatever the color face that it was.
And remember, there were whole blocks where you had the Black dentist, the Black doctor, the Black funeral home owner, the Black grocer. So yeah, because we were in a segregated time.
Right.
You see a blue sign saying colored people with an arrow pointing, and you knew that was
there's that.
Because a black business wouldn't have had those kind of signs.
Yeah.
So.
Right. I mean, it was just amazing to me to watch that happen though in the show, and I was seeing that and learning. I don't know. History is just amazing. This whole thing is just another form of history that was left out.
Mm-hmm.
It was left out of books.
Yeah.
And because it was left out of the history books, it doesn't show, it shows us in a light. And this was something that was said in the documentary as well. It showed middle-class African Americans going out and doing the same thing that white Americans were doing, wanting to take a vacation, being able to pay the money to take a vacation, wanting to just live life like, anybody else. I often wondered, because I have a picture of my grandparents at a place called Sparrows Beach. I wonder if Sparrows Beach was in that particular in the Green Book, because that's where the Black people went. And when they were talking, and I think it was Professor Stevens, he said this was during a time where the men wore suits and a tie, and the women had on their dresses and everything. And I swear to God, the picture of my grandparents, my grandfather was standing there with a white shirt on and his tie, and my grandmother had on a dress, but they were at the beach.
Where is Sparrows Beach?
Sparrows Beach, I believe, is in Maryland, but it was a Black beach where they all where the Black people, that's where they went to the beach.
Yeah, for sure.
That's where they went to the beach. And I have that. And I put that on because I created a page here on Facebook called Today's New Find in Black History, because I'm so tired of the same things. So this is actually streaming on there right now. And I posted that picture on there. I'll share it with you. If you stay on after the show, I'll share it with you. But that particular, and I'll read it. I'll find out exactly where Sparrow Beach is. But that particular beach was a beach for African Americans to go and do, the same thing that they were doing at all of those other beaches. Totally. And I often wonder if they were, they
could have been, for sure, or places that, if there were any hotels in Sparrow Beach, that they could be listed too.
Okay.
One thing that because again, the whole documentary is brilliant, but I thought one thing that you did really well, I think our audience would appreciate, is you really kind of banged it into the ground that people associate restrictions on travel and Jim Crow with the South, whereas you kept saying it was all across America. And what do you think is a constructive, direct way that we can get over this mythology that Jim Crow was just limited to the Southern states?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was created by Victor Green, who was, in New York and New Jersey. And he created the book because of his challenges that he had in going down to Virginia to visit his wife's family, and in traveling from New York to Virginia. But he listed initially the places, the first two books, I believe, were only New York places. So there were many places in New York City that African Americans were not welcome. The sort of classic places like the Cotton Club, right? And some of these, and this is in the 30s, some of these jazz, entertainment spots where Black people could not go. The only Black people that you saw were on stage and serving, right? I mean, there were restaurants, and this was, as you said, all over the country. And he expanded from New York to the rest of the country, and eventually expanded throughout the world. He had green books that had listings in the Caribbean and in Europe, because we needed places to know the places that we were welcome as we were, visiting, working, etc.
Well, again, I mean, you have state constitutions like Oregon. I believe it's either Oregon or Washington State, and I'm going to.
It's Oregon. That was created as a white homeland. Yeah.
It was actually in their constitution.
Yeah.
For the benefit of the audience, that Black people could not live there.
That's right.
And speaking of Black people not living somewhere, Pierce City. I did some research on that one. So just to let you guys know who haven't seen the documentary, Pierce City is in the documentary, and it was about, it had at one point about 300 Black people lived there. And in there, a white woman was killed. And they snatched this, in the documentary, they snatched this one Black man and they pushed him off a balcony and shot him up. But when I did the research on it, and then they set fire to 5 houses because they were saying that the Black people, they went into the Black neighborhood and they set fire to 5 of the Black houses and basically chased the people out of there. Right. Okay, but when I did the research on it, they actually chased out 300 Black people. and they actually hung 3 men, including the man that they shot up. There were only 1,300 people that lived there. 1,000 of them were white, the other 300 were Black. They chased them all out. And from that point on, no Black people lived there because they were saying they were not wanted. I checked to see the population of African Americans in Pierce City, Missouri today.
1. Yeah.
There is 1 Black person living there today.
That's right.
And according to what I read, the descendants of those that were chased out were supposed to bring lawsuits against the city, but they haven't done it yet because of the property that was lost and the things that were done. So I'm saying all this to say, what are your thoughts on the reparations of that? Because that's a reparations thing, that without a doubt, like there's no question at all. That again is a reparations thing because they ran those people straight out. And y'all know how I am. I don't cut my cards on nothing. So with that being said, what are your thoughts on reparations for those descendants of those families that were ran out of there? Because the 2 men, the 2 men that were hung along with Mr. Godley, I think that was his last name, they couldn't have had anything to do with the killing of that white woman because they were elderly. They just killed them to be killing them.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to think about reparations. I mean, I'll just first state off that I'm all for reparations. I think they're completely necessary, but with reparations, we have to also understand that history, right? That's what we're saying. Like, you can't have reparations, or reparations are not possible until people actually understand the history and what that loss is. It's interesting to think about going to a sort of more narrow, tailored view of reparations, where you go to these communities like Pierce City, like Tulsa, like Rosewood, like Greenwood, like all these places where there's documentation of how African Americans were run out and their businesses destroyed. I think that's tricky because we know that there was more than what's been documented because this stuff wasn't documented, but it's certainly a way to begin to actually really pinpoint and be specific about how white terrorism has resulted in economic loss, for our people, for these communities, and at least start there to try to understand and figure out what reparations would look like.
And again, it's the way that the past it doesn't even resonate to today. It is still lived today.
That's right, of
and
course.
I'm thinking in terms of Sandra Bland driving to a job interview, dead. Philando Castile minding his own business in his car, dead. The talk that Black parents have to give their children about what you do to hopefully potentially survive an encounter with the police when you're driving.
Yeah.
So it resonates back to my earlier comment where the automobile was meant to represent freedom for all Americans, not for us. It's still not a safe space for us.
Oh, and Sparrows Beach, thank you, Delma. Sparrows Beach was in Annapolis, and then there was another one in Annapolis called Cars Beach. So both of them were the Black beaches for African Americans. Yeah. And those beaches were she has it between 1926 and 1974. My grandmother died in 1950. My grandfather died in 1964. So those were the beaches that my grandparents took their children to.
Right.
Well, I don't even know how to even start and I hate the word educating because that people just kind of tune out when they hear that word. How do you have a conversation with probably 40% of America that just does not want to acknowledge that the past is still very much part of today? Like that analogy that I gave you, Sandra Bland not being safe, Philando Castile, the fact that we have to give our children the talk for an automobile that white Americans just take for granted. I just turn the key, put my foot on the gas, and I just go where I want to go.
Well, I think that again, this is, my own opinion. I think that one of the things I think white people need to talk to other white people about it. I think they need to be the white people who are, and there are lots of white people who are engaged in this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to use the word woke because that's been like demonized and made fun of, and like they always try to do. But white people who are really engaged with this kind of anti-racist work. And I think they need to do that to that 40% or whatever number it is, they need to have those conversations and do that re-education. I think it's a re-education, like re-education. That's, I think that's what has to happen.
I agree. I think re-education is definitely what it is, but you're faced with those that call the re-education revisionist history.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And it's not revisionist history.
We're talking about facts.
Right. Especially when you can come with the proof of it. When you come in with receipts, this isn't revisionist. This is the stuff that was left out. And how are you calling it revisionist when this is the part that was left out, when I'm showing you, this is the part that you missed.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't know. I mean, this particular, like what you were saying, Brian, to answer it, this documentary in itself is a way to show them, okay, you can't look at this and say, you're right, history doesn't repeat itself, because it's still going on. That's everything right. That was in that particular documentary is actually still happening today. Like without any doubt, these things, there's no way that you cannot look at that documentary and say that this stuff is not still happening today.
Well, the fact that on Facebook you have Black travel groups where people are asking each other questions. Am I going to be safe if I visit this place?
Yes.
It's on today.
Yes. I was talking to Birdie, to one of our cousins, and she actually said, do we need to start another Green Book?
People always talk about that.
She was like, do we need to even start another one again? Like, is that something that has to happen again in order for us to be safe again? And oh my God, is that something that actually has to happen again? That would be a repetitive thing. That would make it to be repeating itself. But in the same instance, it's just a continuation. It's not a repeat.
But the irony of this country is the same people that don't want to listen to this conversation, if we did have a revised Green Book, would say, oh, they're playing the victim card again.
Mm-hmm.
You know that's going to be the response.
Okay, well, call me the victim, because I'm that one. You can call me a victim. I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah, really.
I don't have any problem with that. But
so Eureka, I wanted to get your opinion on this one. We haven't really, the Green Book has not been in the kind of American psyche for a while. But over the last 18 months, I've noticed 2 years actually, I've noticed on television, it keeps popping up more and more often. So you have The Watchmen, the TV series on HBO that didn't feature the Green Book, but it was mentioned. You have Lovecraft Country, where the Green Book may not be front and center, but it is an important part of the story that TV series talks about. What do you think is the renaissance behind the Green Book all of a sudden?
Well, I think that when I started out and said that when the Schomburg began putting Green Books online, that began, a sort of flurry of articles about what the Green Book is. I think that was starting at it must have been about 2015, I think they started it. And so I think that was the beginning of a, re-looking at a re-examination and a rediscovery of the Green Book. Now, of course, you have the movie that came out, the Hollywood movie, The Green Book, that came out, and it happened to come out the same year as my film, which was not intended at all. And there was a lot of critique around that film, if you remember, on many different levels. One, some of the most egregious stuff is that the Green Book it's called the Green Book, but is not about the Green Book. The Green Book is mentioned like one time, and actually mentioned in a way that is kind of dismissive of the book. Another thing that I think is really, really problematic is that and someone pointed this out, that in that film, Black hands never touch the Green Book. It's the white driver who is the one who, which is just ridiculous. And of course, the Green Book, the Hollywood film, is written by, it's an all white director, white writer, so from the white perspective. And so a lot of problems with that film, but I do think what it did is that it gave people notice, or gave people, an idea that they had never heard of. So, for example, the film, that film came out when we premiered, and we were able to use it, and we got a lot of media interest because of the problems with that film. And so it helped with our publicity, in fact, and at least gave people like, oh, okay, Green Book, what is that? And a way to delve deeper. And I think that's what's happened. These things often snowball on each other. It comes out in the zeitgeist, then somebody takes it up and puts it, weaves it into, their TV series like Lovecraft. And so I think it's a snowball effect.
And what do you think is one of the, we've spoken about so many different aspects of the Green Book series, but what do you think is one of the lesser known, or maybe lesser appreciated aspects of the Green Book?
Well, I think it's what I initially said, that it's not just about places to go to avoid violence, but that these places were places of community for us. So some of the places listed in the book that we talk about in the film, like Idlewild, like A.G. Gasson's hotel and motel, these places were big deals for us, and where we had our entertainers performing. Gasson is where the headquarters for MLK, for Dr. King, during the Birmingham, the efforts to integrate Birmingham. These were actually real historical places that housed our leaders, some like our top leaders and our entertainers, as well as families who were, traveling or looking for vacation spots. So it's a kind of banal thing, a guide, like a motor guide. We think of like the AAA guide, or just something that you have in the car. But these were real places that really were important in terms of our political and entertainment history, and provided a space for many of these businesses, provided a space for Black people to go and have these experiences.
So if I, going back in the day, and I'm thinking, I'm using the Green Book, but I'm thinking I want to go one step further. I actually want to write something for the Green Book. How would someone have gone about actually volunteering to actually plot safe routes? I mean, did you just get in touch with Victor Hugo Green?
So what Victor Green did is he solicited advertisements within the book. So he said, let us know, these places, like send in the information, and also postal people. And of course, the post office was one of the places that was open to hiring Black people very early. So we had a big presence in the postal service. They would go to these businesses and say, as they're delivering the Green Book, but they would also he would solicit information from these postal workers. Let me know where the Black places are in Missouri, where they are in Phoenix, where they are in Boston. So he solicited it was like a crowdsourcing, an early form of crowdsourcing. Mm-hmm. That's how people, were able to advertise in the book.
So
as I'm looking, okay, go ahead.
Right, just last one. Then the word of mouth must have been incredible.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, word of mouth is how the migration came about.
Right,
because,
exactly.
with the Chicago Defender, you know, that's how he did the exact same thing, but he did it with the train and the ushers. He, you know, passed them out through them, and they got that information telling them, hey, come north because the South is not for you. And he's credited with like what 500,000 people, moving 500,000 people to the north because of the Chicago Defender and word of mouth.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of people up here that are talking about the fact that it actually are digital green books per se. They're sending out, they got a lot of links up here talking about something in Asheville. It's like just little links of different places of where you can go. So this is really nice. Thank you guys for posting all of this. Renette says that they have a Black business guide that is published here every year, and Sherry Tolliver has shared a link. So this is really awesome that all of this is up here. I did not know that they actually have one. It's awesome that you guys are sharing it, but it's kind of sad that it's actually happening again. When you think about it, that we actually have to have this happening again. It actually is happening.
Well, I think one of the things about these new links, digital links to Black businesses, is not just about, you know, this is where you go to feel safe. It's like, let's support Black business. It's more positive than that, and I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it in different communities, in different cities. I want to know if I want to go out, you know, where I want to spend my money, you know. And even now, post this, you know, this summer and this racial reconciliation, you can go to like Uber Eats and they'll have a thing of like Black restaurants, Black-owned restaurants. I appreciate that, you know.
But you know, they didn't start doing that until the George Floyd situation.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
They didn't,
no, totally.
Matter of fact, they didn't start doing that. Netflix didn't start having a Black film area. I mean, all of that stuff didn't come up until after the George Floyd situation and everything. So that happened because of that. Now, but
definitely. But there definitely were. Before that, we had it in Brooklyn, where I am, you know, a link to the Black businesses. This is, you know, a few years ago, I started seeing this link of, you know, to the Black businesses. And it's everything from wine stores to butchers to, you know, and I love that. So that kind of stuff, I think, is like, how do we support Black businesses is super important.
And let's not forget banks. There's been a real resurrection in the rebirth of Black banks.
Yeah. Major.
Yeah. So one person asked the question and said something about wasn't there a chain of gas stations at Esso? What did it say?
Yes.
Esso that had them available. And the thing is that the Esso oil was actually in the documentary, and they were hiring a lot of African Americans, and as a matter of fact, they were, according to the documentary, they hired their marketing people were African Americans, and they put them at the table, and it you know, it showed the I can't think of the word that I'm trying to say, but it showed the what is the word that I'm trying to think of? It showed what it does to have us at the table.
Absolutely. And Esso, the story of Esso is really interesting. Esso was Rockefeller. So that was Rockefeller Oil. And Rockefeller, he was married to a woman, I forget her first name, but her last name was Spellman. And her family came from a line of abolitionists. They started Spelman College. So there was a long history of, of progressive philanthropy that was through the Rockefellers that we still see up until today. And Esso was, as you said, one of the first, their company was one of the first companies to hire Black scientists, Black marketing people, and they had green books available at their gas stations.
Yeah. Wow, it is 4:55.
Yeah. Good conversation, though.
This was awesome. I'm so glad we were able to talk to you, and we do want you back on the show. Definitely.
For sure. I hope we can make that happen.
So you have another, let's briefly talk about that. You have another documentary that you're doing. Tell us about that.
Yes, I have a film that's coming out this year. Despite the terribleness of it, has been a very busy year. I had a film that came out, two films that came out in September. One about Harry Belafonte and The Tonight Show, which is streaming on Peacock, the Peacock network. And then I did a film for the New York Times about the Breonna Taylor murder and investigation, which is streaming on FX and Hulu. So that's in September. And then this film that I've been working on for many years is finally coming out on American Masters, PBS's American Masters. It's called How It Feels to Be Free. And it's about 6 trailblazing African-American female entertainers and how they reshaped representation for Black women in their particular time period and their field, and how that set up the sort of renaissance of Black storytelling that we're seeing today. And the women are Lena Horne, Nina Simone, Diane Carroll, Abby Lincoln, Cicely Tyson, and Pam Grier.
So guess what? That's what we want you back on the show for. And we're related to Diane Carroll.
Are you?
Yes.
How are you related to Diane Carroll and Lena Horne?
Well, we connect to them. In Edgefield, South Carolina. We connect to both of them in that. And we have
there. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Well, it's on January 18th. It's 9 p.m. Eastern time. It'll be streaming for like 30 days after that, but please check out the film.
And there's a link to it in the comment section of this video, but we'll be posting more about it later on.
Yes, and we also, and I saw that someone asked about the about this particular documentary about the Negro motorist. That's also already in the comments. Am I right?
Yes,
the link for this, that's already in the comments, but we will post it again when it's reposted on the on-demand. Actually, so we want to thank you.
It's one of the first, it's amongst the first comments, so it should be right at the top.
Yeah, right at the top. But you're stay on, and but we want to thank you. Don't close out, but I do want to thank you for getting on with us. And this was awesome. This was an awesome conversation, and we would love to have you back, maybe around Women's History Month, to talk about that show.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
So thank you for spending this hour with us. I'm sure the audience got a lot out of it. Audience at home, thank you as always for spending our hour with us. We always appreciate having you here, and we love having your comments and your questions. And please do join us next week, Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when we speak with Carmelita Williams from the Black Archives of Mid-America.
Yes, we're going to learn some new stuff, new resources.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're finally busting out of the our East Coast genealogy and giving you Midwest genealogy.
Yes, we need some Midwest stuff.
So until next week, have a blessed and happy New Year's. Stay safe. Wear a mask, and looking forward to seeing you next week at 4 o'clock.
Yes, bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.